Hey guys, I'm gonna just do kind of a video lecture today as opposed to my screen recording or any other weird things that I do. I have some cool kind of demonstrations for you here today. Um, Still talking about rotation, but kind of focused on the idea of center of gravity. Okay, so center of gravity is probably a term you've heard before, and it kind of means exactly what you think it means. It means the exact center of an object. So if you take all of an object's mass, and if you average the position of every particle that that's made out of, the average location of all of it. Because most objects, whether you have a weird-shaped objects like, say, scissors, or this L-shaped ruler, or a hammer, say a wrench is a good one because it's kind of oddly shapen. Think of where, it's a lot more mass here, a lot less mass here. Think about where its average position of all of its mass would be. And that's simply its center of gravity. Now, what that has to do with rotation is kind of twofold. One is that when an object is left to rotate by itself, we'd say rotate freely, it must rotate about an axis that goes through its center of gravity. So if we take this wrench and I were to toss this up in the air and have it spin around like this, that rotation has to be going through its center of gravity. So that means that it couldn't be rotating weirdly like this in the middle of the air because that's not its center of gravity. Okay, its center of gravity can be found by kind of balancing it on that. That center of gravity means it's about right here where my fingers are. Okay, so I don't know if you guys can see this here really quick, but if I go to toss this up in the air, okay, drop that time, it rotates on an axis that goes through that. So it could rotate kind of like you just saw it, or it could also rotate like this. That's a different axis. That would be its long axis, and that would also be going through its center of gravity. So when an object is left to rotate freely, it has to be going on an axis like that. Now, rotating freely would not be like doing this, okay? It is still part of my hand, and it is rotating like this. Its axis would be through here, okay? So that's not rotating freely. I mean, like kind of rotating freely through the air. And that would be true for scissors. And if we flung those through the air, we saw those. The center of gravity is probably around here, and we see this spinning through the air, rotating about that. Or if we rotate it along its long axis, kind of like this. Sorry, I was doing multiple of that at the same time. It's going on an axis like this. Okay, so that's kind of the one of the several reasons that center of gravity has to do with rotation. When it's left to rotate freely, it must be rotating on an axis that goes through its center of gravity. Okay, so again, a wrench, its center of gravity be here. More mass here, a lot less mass here, so the center of gravity is going to be closer to the more massive side. You have something like a meter stick here, frame out here, and I made a little dot here where its center of gravity is. This is actually a yardstick, so it has 36 inches. So its center of gravity should be right at 18 inches. If I balance it on there, it should balance if I had my finger on its center of gravity. If I have it kind of off to the side, it's not going to balance so well. So yeah, first is kind of locating the center of gravity. Okay, objects aren't just a single point in space. They take up a lot of space. They're oddly shapen oftentimes, and really, we've kind of been using center of gravity all year long. We just haven't realized it. It's just we kind of imagine objects are a single point in space. Secondly, is what center of gravity has to do with rotation. It has a lot to do with balance. Okay, for an object to balance, its center of gravity has to be supported. Okay, so if I want, this wrench to balance here, this is kind of tricky to do, but if I want this wrench to balance, I have to keep supports directly underneath it. I'm not going to be able to do it for very long, but try to not break my computer screen. Okay. But as soon as the support, say if it's like this, it's going to tip over. As soon as there is not a support underneath the center of gravity, it will tip over. So that dictates a lot of different things. So say take a big tall object, like you're like my coffee mug. Okay, I can tip this so far, and it will correct itself and go back to standing upright. But if I tip it past a certain point, if about right here, it's going to tip all the way over. Okay, let me give you guys a little bit better angle on what I'm doing here. There we go. So imagine its center of gravity is probably about right here, but as soon as this center of gravity, imagine a line going down from this, is outside of this base of support. So, imagine a line going straight down. As long as that center of gravity is past that support, once it's past about here, it's going to tip over. If that center of gravity still has a base over it, that center of gravity is going to pull it back towards the center. Now, obviously, if this had a bunch of really heavy piece of metal or something in the bottom, that would lower its center of gravity, which would mean that it would have to tip further over to get to that point where it can't recover before that center of gravity is past its support base. Okay. If it had a really high center of gravity, it's not going to have to tip as far. A high center of gravity, think about it, it only has to go about here before it would be that center of gravity is past the extremes of its base. That's what I mean. Okay. If I don't want to draw on my coffee mug here, but if this marker will come off. So if you see this little dot I made here, if you guys can see that, say that's its center of gravity. As soon as that dot, try a dry erase marker, a little bit more effective. That, of course, doesn't work. But you can see this purple dot somewhat. As soon as this dot is past one of these two extremes, once it goes past here, it's going to fall. Once it goes past here, it's going to fall in the other direction. So, if you think about it, that's why things with a lower center of gravity, this dot gets lower, that means it's going to have to go to a greater angle in order to tip over. If something has a high center of gravity, that means it's not going to have to go as far of an angle in order for it to tip over. Okay? And that all has to do with its support base too. So if something was, say, triangular like a pyramid, okay, its support base is really wide, its center of gravity is still here. Think about how far it would have to tip over before that center of gravity got past its base. You wouldn't be able to, because a pyramid, that's why a pyramid is a pyramid. It's really structurally sound. But something like this has really high center of gravity, so it's going to be able to tip over pretty good. Or, something even more unstable, say like this mallet. Sorry, I got a bunch of household items here. This mallet is just sitting on my desk. It will have a tendency to, I can balance it, but because of all of its mass is so high up, if I just tip it slightly, it's going to tip all the way over. Okay, its center of gravity is so high that once you can see here, that it's so high that if it even tips slightly, it's going to go the rest of the way. Okay, so center of gravity is very close to the head on things like a mallet or a hammer. And I know where that center of gravity is because I can balance it there. So for this, its center of gravity is right about here. And that's another important point about balancing objects. I made a little mark there to indicate its center of gravity, is that the center of gravity is the point where objects will balance. Okay, you can balance them on their center of gravity. Okay, if there is support directly underneath its center of gravity, either this way or this way. So if I can keep this balanced and I support this directly underneath this, an object will stay upright. And that's why I can sit this here on my tabletop, because there's support directly underneath it. But if I tip it ever so slightly, that center of gravity moves past its support base and it's no longer stable. Okay? So, that's center of gravity in a nutshell. But think about people. You know, a human body is, of course, very oddly shapen. It's not just a rectangle. You know, some people have a higher center of gravity. They're taller. They're built differently. Some have a lower center of gravity. I'm a shorter person myself, so you know, and when I did some sports, you know, like wrestling, that was a little bit of an advantage there in some cases. Same thing for playing football. But in general, in the human body, when you're standing upright, arms at your sides, your center of gravity is a little bit below your belly button. Okay, so if you're standing here, center of gravity is about right here, kind of above your waist, a little bit below your belly button. That is the average position of all of your weight. Now, depending on different people, built a little bit differently, a little bit higher, a little bit lower. Obviously, if you raise or lower your arms, that's going to raise your center of gravity. You squat down, it's going to lower your center of gravity. Now, it's interesting to think about as you change the position of your body, how your center of gravity changes. Okay? Because if you bend over, your center of gravity can be in empty space. You know, say you have this L-shaped ruler. Where is the center of gravity of this L-shaped ruler? Okay? I'm not going to be able to balance it by just holding my finger here. It's always going to tip over. Its center of gravity is probably somewhere over here. So there is no situation where I can just sit this on a tabletop and it not fall over. Okay, because its center of gravity is not part of this. It's not part of this. It's over here somewhere. Now, if I put support over here, it'll balance there okay. But there is nowhere under this base that I can support this and it be stable. Because its center of gravity is located like somewhere about right here. If I balance it this way, I would say its center of gravity is this empty point in space right here. Okay, I can balance it like this, I can balance it like this. That's kind of the intersection of those 2 points. So its center of gravity is outside of the actual object. And if you think about it, you bend over, your body kind of does the same thing. So, while we're talking about center of gravity, I have a couple kind of interesting demonstrations for you. Okay, now, it's going to be a little weird, but if you stand up, see if you guys can see me here. You stand up and you bend over and you touch your toes. You'll be able to do that no problem. You stay nice and stable. But if you try to do the same thing, and I encourage you to do this at home, is if you try to put your heels and your butt against the wall and try to bend over, what winds up happening is you get to about this point and you feel your weight all the way up on your toes until you fall forward and you cannot stay balanced anymore. So try that. Put your heels against the wall and try to bend over and touch your toes. Nobody's going to be able to do that. I can do that really simply. I'm relatively flexible, at least in my lower leg, so I can go down and touch the ground, not worry about falling over. So think about why that is. And I guarantee you, nobody will be able to bend over and touch their toes with their heels and their butt against the wall. Because why that happens is because normally when you bend over, as much as my upper body goes forward, my lower body goes backwards. And my center of gravity stays right here, and my feet are directly beneath me, and I stay really nice and balanced. But with my heels against the wall, that prevents my butt from going backwards, and that just makes all of my body weight go forward. That moves my center of gravity out from right here to just in front of me, and it's here. And the more and more I bend forward, that gets past the front edge of my toes. Now I can be able to support, and you tip over. You lose your balance because your center of gravity is outside of your support base. Okay? So, that's demonstration number one, that nobody can do. The second one you may be seen in science class before, in which half of you may be able to do. And usually it follows along gender lines, meaning men cannot do it and women can, like many things. So again, try this at home, and I would honestly like to know whether or not you are able to do this demonstration. So all you need is a chair or a stool of some kind, and a wall, and yourself. So the challenge is this: is you take 2 steps out from a wall, and I'll demonstrate here for you in a second. Put a chair in front of you, pull it to your chest, and then try to stand up. Seems simple enough. But again, generally speaking, this isn't universally true, but generally speaking, males are not able to do this, and females are. And I want you guys to think about why that is the case. So if I can get you all in the video frame here, let me try and demonstrate. So here is my chair. See if I can redirect the angle of this a bit. Okay, sorry, I had to create a kind of a really weird video angle here. So if you see, I have a chair here, and if you can kind of watch my feet take 2 step lengths, so 2 heel to toes out away from the wall. Stand that far away. Okay, so I'm 2 of my foot lengths away from the wall. I'm going to put this chair in front of me, and I'm going to bend down, put my head against the wall, so that my body makes a right angle, makes an L shape. Grab this chair, pull it up to my chest, and then the point is to try and stand up. And as you can see, I'm stuck. Okay, I could awkwardly slide my head up against the wall, but that is not the rule. You should be able to go there and just stand up like this. And when I do this, and I'm an especially bad case of a male trying to do this, if I put my head against the wall, pull this up here, I can't stand up. Okay, I cannot vertically move myself upward. Females can do that. Oftentimes, males can't. It is also better, the point of the demonstration presents itself a little bit better when you do it wearing shoes, just to get to the appropriate length. So like, do it like a foot length away with shoes on. So like, it's the actual length from your heel to your big toe plus another inch or something. And when I do this in class, it's kind of a cool demonstration. Probably doesn't translate quite as well on video here, but it's awkward because I do it in front of the class. Everybody's like, "What? Why can't you just do that? Why can't you just stand up?" Because you can. I can. Some of you might. Particularly the females in the class might be able to. So I, again, encourage you to try this at home. All you need is a wall, yourself, and a chair or a stool or something like that. And the girls often laugh like, "Why can't you guys do that?" And the guys are like, I'm totally stuck. I can't lift myself up." So the question I'm going to have to you, and I'm going to see if you guys can answer it for me by putting that answer in the comments of this assignment. Make it a private comment so everybody's not reading each other. So answer this question in the comments to me, not the public comments, but the private comments to me, is why do you think females can do this? I'm sure you could look it up somewhere. Why females can do this versus why males cannot? Okay, and the answer isn't like awkward or gross. I mean, it has to do with the body shape and that kind of thing. But I mean, don't. I'm not trying to go somewhere weird with it. So the answer is kind of obvious if you think about it. Probably stuff you haven't necessarily thought about how weight on different people's bodies is distributed a little bit differently. And again, just because of how I'm built, I'm kind of an extreme case because I'm what you might call top heavy, just, big shoulders and stuff like that. So answer that in the questions. That'll kind of be your assignment for the day. Okay. So again, center of gravity has a lot to do with rotation and balance. And balance, if you think about it, is the opposite of rotation. If you are balanced, you are not rotating. If we go back to our meter stick here, if it is balanced here, if I can get it to remain totally still, no rotation. No rotation. If we're not balanced, there is rotation. So balance and rotation are kind of the opposite things. A couple other points I want to leave you with before I finish this video, I don't want to go too long with it, is exactly what you see here with this meter stick. This is balanced. There are no, if you can see this, there are no weights or anything on the meter stick. But as we saw before, if there's a weight over here, this will create a torque, some force acting some distance away from an axis. Some force acting some distance away from an axis causes a torque, causes a rotation. So what I want you guys to think about is why, when I make my axis here, this finger is the axis, when this is off center, I haven't added any weight to the meter stick. Why does it then rotate? What is causing it to rotate? And where? So if it's going from not rotating to rotating, there has to be some torque that's causing that. So in this kind of situation, when the axis is here, off center from the center of gravity, why? What's creating the torque? And the answer is the meter stick itself. The meter stick is creating torque on itself. And that torque acts at its center of gravity. So an object can absolutely make itself rotate if there is an axis not supporting its center of gravity. And you could honestly think of it like this, is that the torque is actually acting from the axis, is that it's acting, here, upwards. There's a force from my finger that is at rest acting upwards on this. Or you could think of it in terms of just the weight of the meter stick itself. And the average position of all of an object's weight is its center of gravity. That is literally what center of gravity means. This is all of its weight. Yes, all of its weight is spread across this entire thing, but the average position of all that weight is right here. And all of that weight, you can think of a little down arrow acting there, is pulling here. Now, if that little down arrow is balanced by a little up arrow from the axis, my finger, then there's no rotation, no movement, everything's happy. But all that weight acts at the center of gravity. So now, when it does rotate, that's because there is a torque that acts this way. It has a lever arm. Okay, so here's my axis. It has a lever arm, and it has a force. That is all that is required for a torque to happen. D, lever arm, F, force. And the force is the weight of the meter stick. Now I can demonstrate that a little bit better by if I add some weight to this. So I got some of my daughter's little toys or whatever that she plays with. Is that if I make the axis not centered here, can I make it balance? Surely. If I add some weight here, got some random household toys, is that if I find the right spot here, okay, so the dot, sorry about that, the dot still represents the center of gravity. Now if I add these weights over here, and you can see that the meter stick stops wobbling, is balanced. The axis is right here. It is definitely not at the center. So you have a torque acting this way. This would be a, from your guys' perspective, a counterclockwise torque. So how is this weight over here, this counterclockwise torque, not making the object rotate? Because the meter stick itself is also creating a counteractive torque in the clockwise direction. So that's acting here. So clockwise is balanced by counterclockwise. You have weight on this side, no weight on this side. Or so it would seem. but the average position of all of the weight of the meter stick acts at the center of gravity. That acts here, and that's what is creating this balance. And I can put any number of different weights on here, and I can even make this, more and more extreme. I'll say I put something kind of heavy on the one side. Probably drop this before I do anything. But as I put more and more weight on the left side, my left side, I've got to move my axis closer to that weight. These are sliding around a little bit, but I think you get the idea. If I balance this here, okay, all of that weight on my left side, I guess that would be the left side of your screen as well, it's starting to tip over, is balanced by the weight of the meter stick itself, which acts at an average position of right here. Okay? So I could put different weights, any number of different weights. You can balance anything if you distribute things well enough. But if the center of gravity of an object is supported, like it is right now, the object is not going to create torque on itself. But if you're off of that, the center of gravity creates a torque. And that's why, just as you stand here, if you lean far enough forward, you will, as soon as your center of gravity gets past the front of your tippy toes, your weight is going to take you forward. You are going to fall forward, or the same thing going sideways. If I lean far enough sideways, I eventually lean so far that my center of gravity is past the edge of my foot, and it eventually caused me to tip over. There is a video, the basketball player Kyrie Irving, that he leaned really far over and was able to correct himself and standing straight upwards. That was fake. I don't know what he did, but you can't go all the way 45 degrees and then come back, keeping both of your feet planted on the ground. That's just not a thing. Some people might know what I'm talking about. With that, there's actually a Michael Jackson music video many years ago for Smooth Criminal, and him and all his dancers did this really cool move where they lean really far forward and slow motion at that far an angle, and then they come back. And everyone's like, oh my god, he's defying gravity. He's not. He patented an actual device. It was like a nail that the heel of his shoe would hook into that allowed him to grab onto the floor and do that. You still needed really strong core strength to do that, but he actually, applied for a patent for that device because it was that neat of a thing. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with one last thing here. This is always kind of a cool one. Is because of this rule of center of gravity, things have a tendency to seem to defy gravity sometimes. If you guys have ever watched a high wire walker, this kind of all applies there a little bit. We'll talk more about that later. It has to do with rotational inertia. There's actually a high wire walk over a volcano live on TV a few weeks ago. Nick Wallenda, I don't know if you guys saw any advertisements for that, but he was a high wire walker, and he was carrying one of these big long rods, and he literally was walking without a safety harness across an open volcano. And he survived, to some people's disappointment. But we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So here is a hammer. You got a string, and you have a little baby. This is like a paint stirrer. You appreciate all the random household tools and stuff that I'm using to teach today's lesson. So, okay, nothing surprising so far. But, and again, nothing is, this isn't a trick. It's just something that is very surprising. Again, all this is comes apart. There's nothing weird going on here. So we fancy that back in there. And see if I can find this balance. And I get this hammer, which is very heavy. And again, this is a normal hammer with a heavy head. And Nothing else. Like I said, this isn't a magician's trick. But this is balancing right now, and it's actually really stable how it balances. I can move this around, and I can even set this on the edge of my table. If you want, you can see that there. Just it's